All right, well, welcome to the kickoff of the Secondary Partnerships and Institute for Faculty Excellence Teaching High School Students in College Roundtable. That's a lot of words. I didn't think about it before I said all of them, but that's the name of what we're doing. And this is a partnership, again, between Secondary Partnerships and the Institute for Faculty Excellence. And we wanted to provide a space and a time for faculty who are working with high school students in their classes and who may not have had experience or training in secondary ed to bring issues and challenges and find some support from each other, and also from Jordan, who is the director of that department, and other faculty. We've got lots of faculty at MCC who do have experience teaching in high schools, like Amy, who's with us today, and is going to present. So that's really the goal. We'll always have some kind of content or some information to share, and then also just time for people to talk. And today, Jordan is going to give us some data, some updated data on numbers of high school students in our classes. And then Amy's going to introduce the campus resources course that she developed and talk just a bit about some tips. I think, Amy, would you call them tips or ideas for helping students who are coming to college for the first time be successful in our classes? Jordan?
Yeah, so thank you. I wanted to just share some 22 fall data. So this, the numbers represent any student currently registered in a fall quarter or fall semester course at MCC. So I say semester because a lot of our enrollment is delivered in the high school by MCC approved high school faculty members. So often those courses are delivered on their semester system, which is the bulk of our high school partners run on a semester system. We are the one institution that continues to run on the quarter system, which is a little bit different. So this fall, an unduplicated head count of high school students enrolled is 6,199 students. Those are high school students enrolled in at least one MCC college credit class. That number does not include, I pulled that information on September 30th. So while MCC, we have our own census date, secondary partnerships, we don't necessarily always fall within that census date because registration is still happening in the high school for all those students that are taking the college credit course in the high school with their high school faculty members. So it's actually the end of September when we finish up our registration period. We do our own roster verification that's different than the census participation roster. So we're able to capture all that high school information. So when I ran these numbers, it was on September 30th. That's typically year to year, fall to fall, when I pull our high school enrollment numbers. So again, unduplicated head count was 6,199 students on that date. Obviously, we know how numbers change as students drop and how that goes. But with that, almost 6,200 students, the total credit hours, quarter credit hours, were 55,257. So a ton of credit hours. Within that, and I guess I could pull up, it's just a simple Word document that I'm looking at when I'm speaking to you. It's not fancy, so that's why I didn't pull it up. But of those credit hours and enrollments, 88% of that comes from concurrent enrollment. All those high school faculty members delivering the courses in the high school. So that's 88% of our total where the enrollments are coming from. Then the rest of that make up the 100% would come from career academies, which is the students coming to campus. And culinary is a very popular career academy for amongst high school students. So career academy, gateway to college, Kickstart Online Institute, which is the students enrolling in online courses delivered by MCC faculty on a semester system. And then College Now, in addition to our SARPI Center operation that we have running for Plain, La Vista, and Ralston students. So that's the rest of the makeup of our student body. So we see MCC faculty delivering courses on campus online, but we also have MCC faculty going out into our high schools and delivering courses at the high school location as well. But again, the bulk of that enrollment is coming from the high school. So that's just a quick snapshot of fall 22 fall quarter and semester enrollment for high school students. Which is currently tracking to be like a fall to fall comparison. It is a 28% increase.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So we can contribute that to a variety of things. Obviously, the first one, probably the tuition waiver. Free tuition is certainly removing a barrier, a financial barrier for students. that may or may not have been able to afford it in the past. And now that we've removed that, they're able to enroll. I'm seeing that probably frequently used in the high schools because the high school classroom is typically a mixed group of students. Some students are only taking it for high school credit, and then the others group is taking it for college credit. So you got a mixed group in that room. So now hopefully we've removed that barrier. So more of those students in that classroom are actually taking it for college credit. And then we added almost 47 high school faculty members last year to our total high school faculty population that are delivering MCC courses. So we had a significant increase in number of faculty delivering the courses in the high school. I think we're up at like 296 high school faculty within our 4-county area that are essentially MCC adjuncts, right? So that enrollment is, that enrollment increase can be contributed to probably the biggest, those 2 factors there. Questions on the enrollment and the data?
You know, Jordan, and you don't have to know this, but what percentage of that, of our total enrollment is that?
I do not know that, but that is a great question. I do know that Randy refers to us as the largest high school enrollment population. Like if we take our enrollment, total high school enrollment, and compare it to other community colleges, like we are larger than some other community colleges because of the number of students that are enrolled here. I'll have to ask him what it is that he compares that to. I forget what he says, but this is a giant piece of the puzzle. I'll ask Tracy to see where we compare against the total enrollment at the institution. That'd be very interesting to know.
Yeah, thanks. I think we're good with questions then.
Okay. Actually, you know what? I want to share one more thing. I found it very interesting because this year I pulled gender of students, and of the almost 6,200, we're sitting pretty equal between the male and female population. We're about 3,000 for male and 3,100 for female, which I found very interesting because I feel like in past, our data can sometimes show very heavy female enrollment. So I was very pleased to see that it's pretty equal representation there between male and female.
Do we break it down by race too, Jordan?
Yep, we started doing that this fall as well. I don't have percentages, I just did total numbers. Do you want me to just share my screen? This is not pretty by any means what I'm looking at. I'm happy to show it to you though. You promise not to judge me.
Yeah, I don't care if it's not pretty.
It was just, I put this together for a department meeting, department update. So this shows the 22 fall. Can you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Student breakdown, gender, male, female, and gender left blank. And then over here is the race ethnicity breakdown. And again, that equals up to that 6,199 student.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
Amy, you ready to show us that class?
Sure. Yeah. Before I do that, I was just going to ask, so both of the faculty that are there with you, you are both culinary faculty, is that right?
Yeah, we should have introduced. I'm sorry, we didn't have a chance to meet each other unless we do this. Do you want to tell them about yourself a little bit and then they can introduce themselves too?
Sure. Yeah, my name is Amy Rector, and this is my, let's see, fourth year teaching English for the college. And I have about 20 years of experience working with high school students prior to coming to Metro. And so I currently teach a number of the Jumpstart classes that Jordan was referring to at the Sarpy location. So I still get to teach high school students, which I love. And yeah, I mean, I think that it's super exciting to me that we have so many students who are able to take classes at the college level, and whatever we can do to make that experience really beneficial to them. And then I also wonder how many of our students end up staying at Metro. I'm not sure, but and then I just had a question for both of you. If the classes that you're teaching are part of an academy and that's how you're seeing high school students, I was just wondering about that. That'll just help me know what to talk about more.
Yeah, I have only a couple. I have one sanitation class that's a mix of some high school students are in it. But I'm not teaching a career academy course this term, maybe next term. I haven't really seen.
I would imagine you will at some point.
Yeah,
You've got a few dual enrolled non-academy in
yes, sanitation.
your Thursday.
Yeah.
Um,
One of them has actually been homeschooled, a high school student that's only been homeschooled. So this is her first time, like being in any sort of school with other class members, and it's a college course. So her eyes are just kind of like being open to the whole thing. It's pretty exciting to see, and she's doing really well.
My name is Peter Walsh. I'm part-time faculty, full-time outreach for culinary and hort. Been here about 6 years on events team, then in this outreach role, then kind of back on events team right now. And I
He does
do
everything.
a little bit of everything, but then I do teach career academy. So I did a couple years doing the sanitation and the orientation. This year I just have the orientation crew for this first quarter, and Chef Davis has. I was hoping we'd get him at some point here, but he carries a lot of the water with the career academy. But between James and I, we're kind of the de facto pair that's been running that. So,
Okay, great.
so
Well,
I'm excited to be here and get some things that I should know, right? Because I do teach a pretty good amount of high school students. So
yeah, I mean, so are both of you, do you have the course, the resource course on Canvas that talks about teaching high school students in college classes? Do you know? I'll pull it up and show it.
we haven't
Probably do, but yeah, I haven't dived into that yet.
You had to ask to get added.
Oh,
Did you ask to get
I
added?
don't think so.
Have you watched
Okay.
this?
Yeah,
like
okay. So, so Naomi, do you want me to just kind of go a little bit through this course and sort of show
Yeah, I think that'd be great.
a
Yeah.
bit useful? Okay. Okay, so yeah, so this was a course that one of our high school instructors, who's also an adjunct at Metro, but he's teaching full-time in a high school, and I put together over the last summer. The goal was really to try to create a resource that hopefully is not overwhelming, but is also just useful to college instructors who maybe have not had any training or experience teaching high school students before. And the thing about it is that, I mean, high school students are really similar, of course, to like any other student. You're going to have, you know, the same types of issues, but there are some things that are a little bit different that we know about this age group, and particularly the fact that they're coming from, most of them, from a high school building to come to then a college campus, or like you mentioned, sometimes even homeschooled students who really need a little bit more help sort of figuring out how college works. So this course, the introductory page just gives a little bit of like some of the information about how many students are doing dual credit. And I think actually Jordan's information would be awesome to add to this, the number of students who we're talking about. But under the modules page, there's the first module is just some information about the cognitive, emotional, and social development of adolescents. And there are a couple of readings and videos that basically just go through and give some information about how the adolescent brain is a little bit different from the adult brain. Although if you teach college students who are like 19, 20, 21, I mean, the evidence about when the frontal lobe is fully developed, for a lot of people, it's not until they're like 25. So some of the same information would work for like a more typical college age student as well, if they are between the ages of like 19 and 25. You know, nothing magical happens just because somebody graduated high school in their brain. But I think it's interesting to know that there's actually, the time of adolescence is a time of extreme growth and like the ability to start learning. So the only time that we have more like capability of like learning things is when we're a baby. So when you're an adolescent, you actually are like really primed to learn new things. And so that's something that's sort of exciting. I think sometimes teenagers particularly get sort of a bad rap, like a negative connotation around the word teenager, and that they don't want to learn, but actually the opposite is true a lot of times. And hopefully you've found that too in your classes, that students are engaged. So this first module is just like background information that I think is interesting. It's pretty short. Both of the readings are short. The videos are each only like 4 or 5 minutes long. And so that's just great, I think, just to have in your back pocket. The second module then is looking at some specific tips and strategies that you can use to help transition students from high school to college. So this first presentation is it's a PowerPoint that's narrated by me, which I can go over some of the things about that today as well. I have the PowerPoint, and I kind of was going to ask you all who are here if there's something specific that you want to talk about, or if you've run into any issues that you want to just, talk about, maybe problem solve. And then a couple of other like specific and practical strategies for teaching young students, things like getting them engaged. Most of these strategies are just good teaching strategies in general. They would work for all students. But I think young people, especially coming from high school, are really used to a level of engagement from not all of their teachers, unfortunately, but many of their teachers who are working hard to do activities to get them engaged. And so that's just a list of those strategies. And then a little bit specifically about FERPA and talking with parents of high school students and things like that. I think that can get a little bit muddy sometimes, but the bottom line is, once a student is a college student, they have the same, like if they're coming to our campus to take classes, they have the same rights as every other college student. They would have to have a FERPA on file for us to be able to talk to their parents. So yeah, can I answer any questions about the resources course? I think Naomi can add you to that, and then you can look at it on your own if you want to. Certainly don't have to, but.
Amy, I wanted to add one thing in there in reference to FERPA, because we do know parents call. Parents will sometimes email faculty. Anytime that they do that, we certainly ask or encourage faculty to contact secondary partnerships, because most often those students are taking the college credit course for high school credit as well. And that it's so important for the counselor to understand where the student is at as far as progress, if they're having any challenges. And sometimes parents will try and get that information to rein in their kid, and we can't speak to them, but our office can speak institution to institution. So we connect with the counselor to talk through any concerns. If a parent's calling, you can certainly refer them over to secondary partnerships, and we'll talk them through some of the barriers for that. But certainly the response to the parent can always be, contact your school counselor. The counselor then can work with secondary partnerships. And that's kind of how we work through that FERPA piece, is institution we can speak. Parents, that's their loophole, is speaking with a high school, if that makes sense.
Right. And I think that's great. And actually one of the, I think, benefits of teaching when you have a partnership with like the school is that you do have people like the counselors who are there to help students. And so seeing them as just another person who can help the student be successful, and also somebody who you can go to if you're noticing that students are struggling or something like that, that's actually very useful to have another adult who can contact parents, and you don't have to do it, but you know that the student is getting the help or whatever they might need. Yes, that's a great point.
Good, that's good to know, because I had sort of assumed that they had a FERPA form by default. Due to I haven't had any conversations with parents, at least not. The only one I've had was through the window of a car where both the student and his dad were there. But which I wasn't quite as worried about, because you've got consent there. That's good to know. The other thing I was curious of was, is there an easy way as a faculty member to check to see if there is a FERPA form on file from self-service side?
That's a great question. I'll answer, because you said you just assumed the Career Academy students probably had a FERPA, and we try real hard to make sure that they all do. And it'll look better going forward with Career Academy students specifically. The rest of the population, it's a little bit more challenging for us because they're not necessarily a captivated audience for us, but the Career Academies are. So hopefully going forward, we'll get the majority of them with a FERPA file or FERPA on file. As far as seeing or knowing, Amy, I'm not so sure.
So I know I used to, when I was a navigator, I used to be able to check it through colleague, but I don't know, Naomi, maybe you know what faculty have access to.
I don't know, but I just looked it up. It says faculty may view the information on the CRI screen in colleague. If you don't have access to that screen, you can contact an academic associate, student services, career and academic skills center. So somebody who has access to that screen in colleague has to tell you.
Gotcha.
If they've signed.
We should find a way to get that, talk to Nina Nizer and see if we can get that viewable on self-service side, because that would be.
It would be nice. And the other thing about a FERPA is that the student has to indicate who can, so just because a student has a FERPA doesn't necessarily mean that they've given permission for you to talk to their parent.
Who's calling, yeah.
Right. So it's tricky. Like you have to be super careful. I like Jordan's suggestion of contacting somebody at like the Office of Secondary Partnerships, and not that you're passing off the parent, but kind of, because we don't want to violate a student's rights, and ultimately maybe getting the high school involved would be helpful anyway, because then now a counselor there knows. So yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with you, Amy. We want you to do what you do best, deliver the instruction, support the student. Let us worry about the parent, the counselor, making sure the student is getting the resources they need on that end. So I would definitely say it's not passing off. It's just, that's part of our job to help support you.
So I think I was probably more intrigued by that just because of the piece of my job that turns into tours and talking to parents and kind of ad hoc advising with my role in the building. I've got advisor access on Cali, but the last time I was trying to find a FERPA form, I had a heck of a time trying to, it's CRI. So
CRI is the screen, and that should show the authorization to release student information. That's the name of that.
okay, I'll see if I have that form. I probably do. But can I share observation?
Absolutely.
The question, but and I don't know if you picked up on this too, but like I think that the students that we get in Career Academy, and a lot of times even the folks who are doing college now over summer, on average are better prepared for the college environment than our other students at MCC. Because they sort of have to be at a exceeding level in high school for anyone to say, hey, you should take a college class. But they have a higher level of academic qualifications than our students on average. So
Yeah, I think actually one of the I personally think that teaching high school students at the college level is a plus. Like I see it as like an exciting opportunity, and I think that oftentimes those students just know how to do school better because they're doing it all the time at the high school level. So they maybe know better, they have maybe better academic habits, they maybe know how to use Canvas or whatever a little bit more easily than some of our students who are coming back after a 10-year break or whatever. So I think that's probably true. I think a lot of times, yeah, these are students who are choosing to do this program and they're excited about it, particularly the Career Academy. Hopefully they're excited about it because they want to do that for their career, which is really cool. Yeah, I would agree with you. I think that's a good observation. I think sometimes people get intimidated by high school students, or I don't know if that's the right word, but they feel like maybe it's going to be more challenging. And in some ways, I think that it is. It's just different, I guess, but they are lovely.
It's a different vibe in the room, but I don't feel like they're hard to teach.
Yeah.
There's different jokes hit with that crew.
Yeah.
Just learning the classroom management's a touch different. It can get a little wild because I tend to have a pretty conversational style in the room, but so that takes a little extra care and feeding. But the only real issue I've ever had with high school was last summer. We had a lot of folks doing college now. That was I think there was tuition credit last year too. So not this summer we just finished, but would have been summer at 21, had issues with people like leaving early, because I teach like a 4 to 11:30 intro to cooking that gets done late. And like parents that were trying to pull people out, and then I think we did a pretty good job just communicating with navigators that the college now should kind of try to avoid that late slot, because it really does go that late and you have to be there till we're done. But
Sometimes later,
what's that?
a couple times it went later.
Oh, yeah, no, I did a lot of work to push to get done on time in preparation for this last summer, knowing that we're gonna have some folks whose mom was waiting in the car, but that's really the only, I would say the only real challenge I've had.
Yeah, I can see that. And I can see that, of course, most high school students are not used to ever even going to school in the evenings. So that would be a shift for them. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback, because we're always trying to think, what can we do better on the educational front before a student is registering for a course, and making sure, we would assume, right, the class time is listed, so it's pretty clear that they need to be there until the end of the class, but perhaps sometimes not. And I think with the summer courses, and we'll see this as we keep moving ahead, so this feedback is really important for us to hear. That first summer, that was the first time MCC had ever waived tuition entirely for a high school student, and we just saw it in blocks of people. And we didn't have a lot of time to like really prepare and put some support systems in place. So I'm hoping that as we continue to move ahead, the free tuition isn't opening the door and flooding the gates that everybody's trying to get into these classes without really understanding what it is, and that it is a college credit bearing class. It is starting your college transcript. You do have to actually be here the full time. So it's just important for us to hear those information, so we know what education we need to do better on the front end for these high school students and their parents.
This summer was way better.
Good.
Summer was
Good.
way better. But I will just add though that like summer of 21 is the hardest I've ever worked as an educator. Like, and it fueled a bunch of structural changes in the way that I run it for intro to cooking. So, I mean, you take the good with the bad, but it's, in the long run, it was a great influence on teaching style and certain things, but that was crazy. But it was crazy for you too.
Yeah, we certainly all learned a lot of lessons. One, because that was certainly still part of the COVID adjustments. That summer is where we also paid for students' tools and supplies and materials. Learned some hard lessons there too, because we had a lot of students take advantage of that and then drop and walk away with a lot of tools and materials and stuff. So we learned a ton of lessons in that 21 summer that we either have changed processes or removed some things. To keep telling us those things so we can change processes or put procedures in place.
Awesome. So Naomi, do you want me to, like I have the PowerPoint, and I mean, I don't know, I can go through it, but I don't know if that's like the most useful thing to do. I'll share my screen, and
And I think
So-
maybe just putting up a few of those things and then seeing if Doug or Peter have seen any of that or have a question about it.
yeah, okay, that's great.
Right.
That's sort of what I was thinking. So the contents, I just added this page for this meeting today. The contents of this PowerPoint go through all those things you see there. So syllabus, setting an agenda and having goals, accommodations for high school students, absences. And it's really just sort of how to talk to students about these things, working with parents. We already talked about that. Working with high school partners. So if you're teaching a cohort class, sometimes that's easier because you know that you can maybe talk to somebody at the Office of Secondary Partnerships, and they'll know exactly who that student belongs to in terms of their high school. Other issues like the maturity level, dealing with controversial issues, the phone policy, things like that. So is there anything on there that you see that anybody wants me to talk about a little bit, or
Yeah, I said that.
I'm having a hard time with that one. I hadn't even thought of it this way with my Monday orientation section with the high school kids. I don't think about it as a phone policy because usually it's not a big issue with most groups, but that one gets off the rails.
Yeah, so I'll just tell you where many high school students are coming from. A lot of high schools, I think since COVID, even a lot of high schools have become even more strict with their phone policies to where I know there's multiple buildings where students, the second they come in the door, they have to put their phone in like a cubby and they're just not allowed to have their phones. So imagine, your students, if they're coming from an environment like that where it's very restricted, sometimes they just need, you need like, and I realize this is not what you teach culinary, but like they need some instruction about how do they even like have their phones with them in a class, what's appropriate, when is it okay to be on their phone, and like, I think having those conversations is valuable, teaching students your expectations and then teaching them how to do that. So if you see a student not doing it, correcting them. And but at some point too, I think you have to, this is just my personal opinion. At some point after you've taught them all that and you've tried to reinforce it with them, I think you just have to say to them too, like, there's going to be some natural consequences, because if you're on your phone and you miss instruction, you missed it. And I would imagine for culinary, sometimes that's like a safety issue. Like it could be a very big deal if students are missing instruction. So I don't know. Have you found anything that works for you, or
Yes, I haven't, I've been so burnt toast this fall that I haven't put a lot of energy into addressing it. I'll be honest,
Whenever I see it, I just kind of say, like you said, like, hey, this is important stuff. Like, you don't want to miss this. Can you please put your phone away? And then they usually scramble real quick and put it away. But
I usually just call them on it. Like, I was like, what was so fun? Like, and it usually works with adults, right? That I'll just say, oh, what's so funny? And I'll walk over there and like, okay, or try and put, even occasionally I'll try and put something up on the screen, like if it's some meme or something, but just because I do want to connect at the same time, right? Like if it's really,
Absolutely.
if it's semi-relevant, and every once in a while it is, like I'll connect it and it's a bridge to the students, but I've got a couple pairs that are just like, I think they must be Snapchatting or something, but I don't know.
yeah. And I mean, I think it's a personal preference.
holding it right there.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's like a personal preference how much you want to deal with it. Like I personally, I don't like to get into any sort of power struggle with a student. So if I ask
Oh, I
a
don't
student,
either.
to put their phone away and they don't, or they get it back out, and I mean, then I'm like, well, okay. And then, I mean, that's when I have the conversation with them about like, there are just these natural consequences that are going to happen. You're going to miss content. You're going to, and this is college. I'm not going to have you put your phone in a cubby like maybe you do in high school. But I do think it's worth, I know some teachers have an explicit policy in their syllabus. And I think that is actually a good idea, maybe to have something like that if you're finding it to be an issue. Like, what is your policy, and then review that with students, and then also just teaching them like when they can be on their phone. So if there's a break and you say, if you need to check something on your phone, now would be an appropriate time to do that. I think if you do that at the beginning of the quarter, most students will learn then how to behave for the rest of the time with you. Yeah.
I mean, we're close to end of quarter. I think I'm gonna dad voice it once.
Yeah.
Just
A lot of times too, in the labs, especially if you just approach it from a sanitation standpoint too, and say, hey, our phones are dirtier than
Absolutely.
those things that we touch, and you need to make sure you wash your hands after that. And then
Yeah.
it's pretty much every lab that I end up saying that to someone, and catching it in myself too, when I'm checking the time and things like that. So, I mean, I do it too. So.
I don't know if it would work with high school students, but I tell my adult students about research on the impact of the phone on learning.
oh,
And I can find and send it to you,
well,
but
that'd be great.
there's one that like students who are test taking, if the phone or actually trying to memorize something, if the phone is even in the room with them, it lowers their ability to recall and to make the memory, to remember, just having it in the room, because your brain knows
It's
that a
there.
notification could come
Yeah.
at some time.
Yep.
And so I say when you're studying at home, like put it in another room, lock it in the cupboard, do something to get it away. And if you can't do that in the classroom, at least have it in a bag. But the thing I was thinking about is I wonder if for high school students, are their parents texting them to find out how they're doing or what time they should pick them up? Like,
Yeah.
is that a reason why they might be on their phones a little more?
It is, I don't mind. Like, I come from the perspective that we're all adults, and like, if it's not disruptive to the class, then the only person they're hurting is themselves. But if they're disruptive to the classroom agenda, that's when, you know, and that's what I've been running in this board, where it's like, okay, this is bordering on disruptive to the room. For me, that's when it's an issue, because you got the natural consequences are obvious, and I try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and I think, yeah, then I think it's just an issue of like, what would you do even with any adult student who was doing anything that was disruptive? If, the whatever policy you have, I suppose the most escalated version would be if you can't get this under control, you're going to have to leave. And then you'd have to address that or deal with that, which hopefully it doesn't get to that point, but yeah, phones can be, I sort of go that same route as Naomi sometimes. Like I read that same study and I talked to students about like addiction to their phone and like phantom, that there's like that phantom buzzing, like people will think that their phone is notifying them of something and it's really not. And I think.
Wait, what is that? Amy, say that again. People
So,
get scanned.
they'll have like, it'll be, I can't remember what they call it, but it'll be like a phantom, when your phone's like on vibrate and you can hear it still sort of, and people will think that they've heard it. And so it's really, even when it's not like on, with them or whatever, it's taking up a lot of their brain power. And I do think, I agree, like even just talking with students about that, because I think more and more I've noticed students, especially young students, high school age kids they're worried about like the impact of things like their phones and social media more so than I think we've had social media and phones being so ubiquitous for long enough now that young people are actually starting to worry about how it's negatively impacting them. And so sometimes if you even just talk to them about that, some of them will respond.
I want to put a slide in there, send me that stuff, because I think I'm just gonna put a slide in all my day ones that just talk about how much consequence there is to your ability to take and recall information. I think that's sellable in a lot of cases. For the couple I've got right now, I think I'm just gonna do a dead hard stop in lecture, long pause, look them in the eye and say, that's incredibly disrespectful. Let it hang for 10 seconds and I bet it's done.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I've been in the classroom, I'll admit, but as a teacher, I would just stop and say, I'll wait for you. And that was enough for them to be like, okay, I'll put it away. It's not important.
Yeah. Anything else that you see on either on the screen or anything else, that any other issues or things that might be interesting to talk about?
Full practices would be great.
The helpful practices. Yeah. Okay.
that's how to
So
use TikTok.
yeah, so these are things I think that like maybe you already do. Like I certainly don't want to come across like that I have some secret knowledge that people don't already have, but some of the things I think that are particularly useful for high school students is to, and again, you're not required to do this, but like it's going to make your life easier as well, to offer really explicit reminders about policies, expectations, homework. And maybe you already do this, like I said, but I think that sometimes they are very used to teachers telling them all the things all the time. So like, sometimes at the college level, it's like, well, if it was in the syllabus, you should have known that it was due. And of course, that is your right. Of course, that's true. But a lot of times younger students, they just need the reminder. So that's just a really easy thing that you can do. And then I don't think with culinary, I don't know that this is much of an issue with culinary because I think probably you're doing stuff, you know, you're maybe doing hands-on things more often than sometimes like, for instance, in an English classroom. But like encouraging that active participation, changing activities like every, 15 or 20 minutes, if it's possible to do something different, or having like a small group discussion, a whole group discussion, if there's something that you need to be talking about, just getting them doing things. Again, though, I imagine in your classrooms, probably you're doing stuff pretty regularly. If you do lecture, I think limiting that to really short bursts. So the general rule of thumb is like, what is it? Our attention span is like how many, the grade that we're in, I think, like something like, so like, like 15 minutes of sustained talking is like, that's a pretty long time for somebody to just be listening without doing something or participating. So just having shorter lectures, then breaking it up with things for them to do or things for them to talk about. And I imagine that you probably already do this, but like particularly young people, I think they really respond to relationships, asking them about their life outside of school, about their activities, their interests, like what they do for a job. Making those personal connections, I think, is the number one thing that makes students want to come to your class, and then also behave appropriately if maybe they, maybe sometimes they wouldn't otherwise if they didn't have that personal relationship with the teacher. And then another thing, I think, just addressing any behavior concerns individually and privately. I think young people, especially like, can't always understand sarcasm or even like calling them out publicly, I think can be really embarrassing for them at this age. It can really turn a situation that didn't have to be a big deal into something that is more of a big deal. And I think like I read an article that said even up to like sophomore or junior year, some people cannot understand sarcasm. So I know that was something when I was younger, I was pretty sarcastic and try to maybe be like sort of funny, but I realized that it wasn't always landing. And so even just like that kind of sort of sarcastic remark about, to curb discipline or behavior or whatever, doesn't always work with younger students. Giving them the benefit of the doubt always, like assuming that they are trying to do the right thing, and then reassuring them about their progress, that they can do this, that they are doing it, that they can be successful. And then I think too, like, and I think maybe you already said this, like they really do want to learn and do well. And so if you can practice patience with them, like they are coming here willingly, like they signed up for this program and for this class, and it's not required that they come to college. So I think if you can meet them where they are at, they're much more likely to do really well in the class. So. And then if you always have any other helpful practices, things that you've noticed, I'd be.
Amy, these are great. I was going to make one comment about like the policies and expectations homework. There are some districts that encourage teachers to not provide homework, that all coursework be done in the classroom. So the concept of homework and doing things outside of classroom time might be new to some high school students. In addition to some districts also allow students to wait to turn in homework assignments, do tests until the end of the term. They can allow multiple repeats. So sometimes having actual hard deadlines and only one shot to do things is also a very new concept for high school students. And even though it's pretty obvious for us day to day in a college setting, it might be very new to a high school student to actually, oh, you mean that's due October 31st? You actually mean that.
Right.
Talking through that and making sure the students understand is probably pretty important for a high school kid.
Yeah, that is.
How much, we have a lot of homework in culinary, and you assign.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quizzes and online things like that, we put hard deadlines on.
And I have a son who's a sophomore, and I know, I think from other OPS teachers that, homework in they look at it as very formative, and so it's a very, very small part of the grade for many high school students, and then it's the assessments that form the larger part of the grade, and so he'll often say, oh, it doesn't matter, it's just homework, that's homework, it's only a tiny bit, as long as I can do it on the test. And then I think here, oftentimes we weight homework a lot bigger than that, right? It becomes part of our assessment, so
Yeah.
that would be something to be aware of, or to just alert them that homework is not just for practice, it's to show me what you can actually do.
I think I don't know, we definitely hold deadlines. I mean, in a lot of my syllabus, it says, this is the deadline and late work will not be accepted, or without prior discussion with instructor for whatever reason,
And that is wildly different from I will 99% of high school classes. Because they will very often, teachers will allow students to turn homework in until the end of that unit, or even until the end of the semester, honestly, sometimes. And so I think it's great to have it in the syllabus. Of course, that's good, but then also just really, really hitting, especially at the beginning of the quarter, that's the policy. Hey, don't forget, and also if you have the policy of that students can talk to you ahead of time if they need an extension or whatever. I know this might sound silly, but sometimes teaching them how to communicate with you. So is it okay to send an email? What kind of information would they need to put in that email? Do they need to talk to you in person in class? Like, it's worth it, I think, at the beginning of the quarter to just set up those expectations. And then if a student doesn't do that, to just remind them individually, like, hey, I saw you tried to submit this homework late. Remember, here's the policy. Here's why I'm not accepting it for credit. Here's what you should do next time if something like this happens again. I think it's worth it, because they'll get it, but it's very different from what they're coming from. It's really different.
Yeah.
What about this topic?
I appreciate when the college instructors adhere to those deadlines, because it's teaching our young people future practices. When you're in a job, you have to be there. You have deadlines for your boss. So it's helping get them in that mindset. So I appreciate that we provide deadlines and we stick to them.
The only other thing I was thinking when you asked about what could be added to that list is a lot of times what I do, well, just with students in general, but I've noticed a good response from high school students is just asking them questions like during the lectures. Just to kind of get them thinking about what they may do and that could relate to the topic.
Yeah, like an interactive.
Yeah, just like, how many times do you think you touched your phone in the last whatever? So, but just kind of getting them thinking about, and I know I just shadowed a nutrition class and we were talking about water and how much water you think you drank yesterday, and just kind of getting them to like add up their, like how much water they think they consumed. Was it a quart? Was it 2 cups? Was it, just things like that to try and get them to think about practices and what they do.
Absolutely. And oh, sorry, Jordan, go ahead.
My humorous remark was, can you email me on occasion and ask me how much water I've drank? That would be helpful for me.
Coffee would be,
count?
yeah. Well, actually, I just sent my wife something that apparently caffeine is now considered not dehydrate you. That was like a study that was done in like the 40s, and they only did a very small population of people. It was an NPR article that I just read this morning, and I emailed to my wife. I was like, see, coffee does hydrate me.
And from the medical environment, like they count coffee on intake output. Like, they count it as intake. So
Yeah.
98% water, right?
Yeah.
99% water.
But yeah.
Yeah, and I think one other thing that I think is pretty useful that maybe you already do again is for any lecture or any sort of sustained like time when you're giving information, is to always have something visual that students can look at. That's another thing that they are pretty used to in most high school classes is something for them to be looking at, whether it's like, bullets of things that maybe they should be taking notes on, or even just to keep them engaged by being able to read something while they're listening. I think that is also just a good practice, particularly for those younger students. And if you expect them to take notes, teaching them how you want them to take notes, like not prescriptive, like you write this word down, but like teaching them that's a skill that a lot of students don't come to us with. They don't have that skill. And or if you watch a video or something, what's your expectation? What are they doing while you're watching the video? Are they taking notes? Are they just listening? Are they going to have to answer some questions afterwards? Just all of that stuff is just useful, I think.
That's such a great point, Amy. And we have people on campus that can come in and either teach you how to teach your students how to take notes, or just come in and talk to your students for 10 or 15 minutes about good note taking practice. Because people don't, it's not something you're born knowing how to do. Amy, thank you so much. I think that resources course is such an important addition to what we have for faculty. I'm just so happy with all the work that you put into it, and really thankful that you did it for us. Thank you so much.
Sure. Yeah.
Great. And Jordan, high five. Good job on collaborating. She's not going to high five me. There we go. There we go. Yeah. Thank you. And thank you for coming. It was good to have a live audience.
Yeah, thanks for your time, guys. It's great.
Yeah.